Elvis was an only child, yet this was a cruel twist of fate. His twin brother Jesse was stillborn 35 minutes before Elvis entered the world. The loss would haunt him throughout his life.
I love you.
We used to go up to Elvis's twin brother's grave, and he'd sit down and he'd cry like a baby at times. You know, he'd say, if it wasn't for me a living, my brother might have would have lived, you know. And he felt guilty that he lived and his brother didn't live.
The Presleys, like the majority of families in the Deep South, were active churchgoers, and it was at the Assembly of God Church in Tupelo that young Elvis first became drawn to music.
They really didn't have any place else to go except to church, not only for religion but for entertainment to some degree, except maybe in honky-tonks or in speakeasies or juke joints. So church became a place for social activity, but it became really, I think, the central vessel for hope.
Religion, of course, this is the Bible Belt. Religion was very important in this area. Elvis was part of the charismatic religions, as we refer to them. He was a member of the Assembly of God, which is akin to the Pentecostal church. They're much more emotional, they're much more vocal, they're more participatory, I think would be the word. At a very early age, he was participating in singing at church.
It was a holiness church, which means these were churches, evangelist churches, and churches in which the congregation didn't just sit there, you know, but joined in and joined in. And of course, he sang there and he listened to the sermons. I've listened to many of them. They're marvelous.
The very first music he heard was the religious music, in my opinion, before he heard the other sounds. And in the Pentecostal and Assembly of God church, you have to realize, if you haven't experienced that, they can run from very subtle, very soothing to almost African drum beats. I mean, very vivacious. So there was a broad spectrum there that he was exposed to.
It didn't take Elvis long to move from participating in the congregation to singing solo. Country singer Red Foley's ballad Old Shep became Elvis's song of choice when he built up the courage to perform on his own in front of an audience.
He was singing Old Shep and singing it a cappella, unaccompanied, first here at Lawhorn School. In fact, on the stage behind me, he sang in chapel for his teacher. She heard something that she thought merited encouragement. She went to the school principal and told him that she had a boy in her class she thought would be a good entrant in the county fair.
The talent contest at the annual Mississippi-Alabama Fair was a real test of the youngsters' courage. An audience of hundreds watched Elvis's a cappella performance, which earned him 5th place.
As a 10-year-old, to get up unaccompanied when probably everyone else was, stand on a soapbox to reach the mic, and sing Old Shep, which is, if you've ever heard it, it's a very tearful song. It shows a determination, an unstoppability, that regardless of the fact that I don't have anybody to accompany me, regardless of the fact that I may not be the best dressed one on the stage, or I don't have a specific costume. If you look at the pictures from that day, some of the people have costumes on. He's just got on his Sunday best, so to speak. But he's given his best, he's given his all. And it's an unstoppable attitude that I think he acquired at a very early age that carried him through some times when everybody didn't want to hear Elvis. We know 1956 was Elvis's year. I mean, he burst on the whole of the United States at that point. But we forget all of those one-night gigs that he did the 3 or 4 years prior to that. And if you look at 1954, 1955, he was on the road constantly, playing every gym, every little dig that he could get, honing his craft, and that's that unstoppable attitude that he had.
Elvis was not singing a cappella for long. On the eve of his 11th birthday, he was brought to this hardware store in Tupelo, where his mother asked him to pick out a present.
Elvis and his mother Gladys shopped for several things. They looked at a bicycle and a rifle, and he liked being a boy. He liked both of those ideas. but his mother settled that he couldn't afford that, he only could afford the guitar. And so his mother bought him a guitar here at this very counter. In fact, this counter is where it's been all my life, and before that, my dad says this, when he was alive, said this was the counter we sold from in the music department. And so we still have it here, and tourists come from all over the world to see where Elvis bought his first childhood guitar.
The salesman was the late Forrest L. Bobo.
Mr. Bobo worked for my grandfather, who's also George Booth. He worked for us for about 20 years. I remember Mr. Bobo, and after Elvis died, a friend of mine asked me to get this properly recorded. So I contacted Mr. Bobo, and he provided this letter, and he signed it. His handwriting was rather feeble at the time, and he didn't want to write it out all by hand, but he got his daughter to type it. And then he signed it, and it documents the sale in his memory, how he remembered it. And I think it's pretty accurate with what Elvis has said at times, too, in biographies.
Well, the story you just heard at Tupelo Hardware, where Gladys and Elvis come in to buy a rifle or a bicycle, and the store clerk and Gladys sort of sway him to the guitar. I'm sure that's probably the way it happened. But Gladys had long wanted Elvis to be an entertainer. Gladys had aspirations of being an entertainer when she was younger. I feel like she had certainly planted that seed. And, you know, when you're a young boy, maybe you can't always say what you really want. You've got to go what's with the flow, which certainly a rifle would have been. But I don't think it took a lot of persuasion to get Elvis to buy that guitar. Because when I spoke with Reverend Frank Smith, who was his preacher at the First Assembly of God Church in East Tupelo, very soon after getting that guitar, Elvis was coming to Brother Frank, who happened to be the man that taught him Old Shep, wanting to learn a few chords. And then he told me that very soon after that, Elvis got a book, and he brought the book over, wanting Frank to help him read the music to play a few more chords. And Frank said he told him, just keep banging on it, boy. That's what I did when I was a kid. Then he hangs outside WELO radio, waiting for Mississippi Slim, a local country music entertainer, to come out to get him to show him a few chords. You know, if you just took a guitar as a consolation prize, I don't think you would have all that interest in it later. So I often wonder if that wasn't one of his desires to begin with.